Okay, we're going to be using something called Sketchbook Designer. Before we have a look at that, I just want you to check if you've installed the Wacom tablet driver, you should be able to access this. Now, if it's not on your desktop like mine is, you need to go into Windows, and inside Windows, if you type in Wacom, you should find it up here. So this is for the tablet properties, and you can right click on that and you can add it so it comes onto your taskbar or whatever if you want to, so you can find it more easily. I'm just going to open it up again. Here it is. Sketchbook Pro is what I'm going to be using. What I'm interested in though is this thing here called mapping. Now mapping tells the tablet which part of your display to show. So for me at the moment I've got my laptop connected to a bigger monitor, so I actually want, instead of just some of it, I want this to actually pick up the whole of my screen, so that when I use my tablet each corner shows the corner, the pen shows the corner of my actual monitor. So if yours doesn't say that, if you don't have this red line like this, you need to come into this feature and you need to actually click on it using this one here to choose whatever it is to make it set up correctly. Once you've done that, you can close it, and then we can launch into our software, which is, I've got mine marked at the bottom here. And when it opens, you get the choice of going between the Pro version and the Designer version. We're going to go for the Designer version. So that's going to open up. Now when it opens up, it's got a blank canvas, which can be, we can actually use the roll of our mouse to go in and out of it. But I want to actually set this to a particular size. So I've got one set up already, which is an A3 isometric one. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to go File, and you're going to Open. And I'll tell you where the version is that you can use, but the one that I want to actually use now is this one that says A3 isometric template DWG. The DWG is actually an AutoCAD file. I'm going to open that up, say OK. It's asking us if we're aware we're using an education version. And then if I scroll with my mouse now on the wheel, I can see that I've got an isometric grid in there. Okay, now we're going to look at lots of things on this software. I'm going to talk you through all of the various tools and toolbars and things in a minute. But the first thing to start off with, the most important one probably, and in fact I'm going to close these other ones down so we're not even looking at them, is this one called Layers. Now layers is important. It's important to understand how this software works, and layers is a massive part of it. So as in Photoshop we can have different layers. A layer is basically like a sheet of glass, so we can have one on top of the other on top of the other. So the one that's at the top, this one I've got called Vector 1, is the one which is basically closest to my screen, and the one at the bottom, which is the canvas, is the one that's right at the bottom. You can see I've got a lock on this one, so my isometric one is protected. If I take the lock off, I could damage this. I don't want to damage it, I'm going to leave it locked, but if I don't want to see it, I can turn it off. So I can switch the eye off. The layer's still there. Above that now, I've got a paint layer and I've got a vector layer, and you'll notice when I click on the layer it turns a different color. So if I was working in my vector layer, I click here and I would be able to draw onto this layer. Now the difference between a paint layer and a vector layer, you actually get different tools with them. So if I'm in the paint layer, I'm going to switch now back my toolbar back on again. Okay, when I'm working in my paint layer I get a certain set of tools along here. If I work in my vector layer, my tools change slightly. Now I don't know if you saw the difference there, but if I click on paint and I click on vector, so the paint layer is basically like drawing with pixels, so it's more like a photograph. It's like the kind of things you get in Photoshop. Vector layers are different. Vector layers are working with lines, so this time it's a little bit more like Illustrator. It's drawing lines and we can edit the anchor points afterwards. So probably the best way of using this software is to use the paint layer for doing sketching, and then you use the vector layer for doing the kind of more finished drawings. And I'm going to show you how you can combine those things all together. It is worth saying at this point, whenever you're on a particular layer, you'll see that there's a triangle on the outside, a pointer. If you click on that pointer, it opens up a menu for that thing. So we're in paint layer 1. On here I've got things that I can change, like the opacity and various things to do with brightness and so on, and they're going to be useful to us later on, and I'll be able to explain why when we actually do some drawing. Same thing with the vector layer. If I go into the vector layer, again there's a set of options within that layer. I'm going to turn it back off again for the moment. I'm going to move mine back over here where it was. Now the other thing you can do with these layers is you can create more of them. So anytime you're in here, if you hold your mouse down over any of these, you'll see that you get options popping up. So I can delete a layer, I can add a new paint layer, I can add a folder to put my layers in, I can add a new vector layer, and so on. Clear layers. Clear layer means get rid of the stuff that's on it. I can merge down, which means it puts a couple of layers together into one, and so on. I'm not going to do any of those things for the moment. What I am going to do though is I'm going to do some sketching. So I'm going to actually come onto here, and instead of calling it paint, I'm going to call it sketch, and I'm actually going to type into that area so that I can remember what this layer's for. And I'm going to go into my vector one, and I'm going to call this one finished vectors. So I know where I'm working, and I want to make sure that I don't accidentally draw on the wrong layer, so I'm going to lock my vectors layer off, and I'm going to have my sketch layer open. So now I can come and I can sketch in here. So I'm actually using a Wacom tablet. I'm going to use the tablet. I'm going to use my mouse at the same time as well. I'm going to roll with my mouse. Now if I don't want to roll with my mouse, I can hold the space bar down on my keyboard, and I'll get another set of options that will pop up. So if I roll with my mouse, I can make my screen go in and zoom out and so on. If I hold my mouse roll button down, I can move my canvas around, so very much like Photoshop. Also I've got some options down the bottom here, so things like if I wanted to revolve the canvas or flick it over, I can use things like this. I'm not sure why you'd want to rotate anything. The zoom is there, the pan is there, the same as I'm using with a mouse. Fit to window will make the whole thing fit into the screen size as best as I can, and home will show me the actual size, so the A3 size in this case. I'm just going to leave it like that for the moment. I'm just going to zoom and pan up a little bit. Now what I want to show you is basically if I now use my tablet, and I've got my pencil tool selected up here. Now in my pencil tool I've got various options along here. I'm just going to use the first one. I'm also going to turn my colours back on again. So inside my colour editor, basically I've got a lot of options here. If I click on this up arrow, I get a very basic colour puck. Clicking in the colour puck gives me the option of moving around to choose different colours, and when I choose a particular colour, so say I want a blue, the internal bit then will show me lighter and darker and different kind of amounts of fill of that colour. So I can play around in two different ways. Now if you just want a bright colour, you keep this little circle over on the right hand side of that rectangle. If I click off, move off, I want to go back to the full menu, I just click that arrow again. And even on here I've got various options, so I can still use this technique here for choosing and refining. I've got the options of going for the grades of that colour down the side, and you can see it goes from the white at the top to the black at the bottom, or I can go across from this way. Okay, it's going from the left here to the right here, and then back down to the bottom that way. So there's lots of ways of choosing colour. I can change colours in here as well to balance things, and you can see all the time I get a live preview coming up on the side there of what that colour is going to look like as a line. I've also got the option of coming in here and choosing from Copic library, so the same as our markers. If I want to choose any of these things, I can click on the colours here and I can play around with them and use them that way. I've also got a really nice feature here which allows me to see what things will look like in 3D. So if I wanted, say, a cube, I can choose a cube, I can choose a colour, so again we'll go for a blue kind of colour, bluey purple, there we go. And I can even say here how much reflection I want on the image and where the light's coming from. So at the moment most of the light's going on the top. We can put a bit coming in from the left and very little from the right. Okay, so that basically allows me then to use this colour picking tool here and shade in shapes. So if I want to click here and choose the top colour, that's the top colour. That's the left hand colour, that's the right hand colour. So I can use that for actually shading my drawings, and we're going to do that in a moment. Okay, along the toolbar here, so I've picked my pencil tool and I'm going to choose just a simple colour for it, so we'll go for a black colour. Okay, I'm just going to give it a test and see what that comes out like. Now, because I'm using a tablet, if I press my mouse hard, my pen hard, I get a dark line. If I do it light, I get a light line. So it's very similar to using a real pencil. I'm going to come down the bottom here, choose a rubber or an eraser, and if I use my keyboard, I can make use the square brackets, same as Photoshop, to make my eraser bigger or smaller. So I'm going to rub that line out. I'm going to come back for my pencil line here. Okay, so I can also use what's called my attributes. So all tools have got attributes. These are the attributes. I might just collapse that up a minute. These are the attributes for the pencils. So there's different types of pencils that we can go for. And again, I'm getting previews to whether it's sharp nibbed, medium nibbed, or sort of dull point for shading. And I've got the size of my pencil here. So if I want a 1mm line, that's the size I'm going to go for. So Control Z will undo, or you can use these undo and redo buttons up here. Okay, so if I wanted to just do a very basic sketch, so I'm going to just draw a cube to start with. I'm going to just sketch on here the kind of rough dimensions of my cube. I can even count if I want. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 6 this way, so I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 this way. So roughly, that's the size of my cube. I'm going to come across here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is that 1, 2, 3, 6 to here is that corner. So I'm doing this very roughly and very quickly, just to get myself a rough shape. But it's more to demonstrate to you how I'm using these tools. Okay, so nothing very impressive about doing that. I could easily do that on paper. Okay, what I can do now is I can come into my sketch layer. I'm gonna actually turn off my isometric layer, so I'm just left with my cube, and I'm going to go into this layer, and I'm going to change my opacity down. So I'm going to actually make this much more kind of harder to see. Okay, the reason for that is now I'm going to lock this layer as well, and I'm going to use this layer as a guideline for me. So I'm going to go into my finished layer, my vector layer. So I've got slightly different tools now. Now some of the tools I've got up here, so you can see this one here allows me to draw lines that are joined up from points. So I'm going to choose that one. I'm going to stick with my pencil for now. I've now gone to 2mm, but what I can do is I can literally click. Sorry, I need to unlock my layer first. I hadn't unlocked my layer. I can click on any particular point, click to another point, and it draws lines in for me. Now you can see there's a tick pops up. When I click that tick, it finishes that point off for me. So if I want to go now and finish this shape off, I can click on this red one, click on this red one, tick. That's one complete shape for me done. I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. I'm going to click from here to here, say yes. You get the idea. So I can very quickly create a shape which is a lot more accurate and a better looking shape than the original one. What I can do now is I can start doing things like adding colour. So we can come back to our colour wheel that we were using, and maybe I'll go into my cube one and I'm going to use some of these colours. So I'm going to choose the top colour. I'm going to come over here and I've got various fill options. Now this first one is just a plain fill. So if I click in here, it literally goes one colour. Okay. If I choose a different type of fill, I could have one which has got a line on it. So now I get handles here which I can play around with. So at the moment I've got 3 colour wheels. I've got a white one and I've got 2 grey ones on the outsides, but I'm going to pull this whole thing so I can change the shape of it. Okay, this one is only affecting that particular fill. Now it's up to me where I put these lines. If I want the white line over here, if I want this to be smaller, I can even add in extra points. So anywhere where I hover over the line and I see that little plus, I can put in more colours. So if I go in there and click them, I can actually choose whatever colours I wanted from those things, and I can change them completely. So at the moment now I'm going for getting some red colours going in there. Pressing escape will get rid of it. This one here, if I chose this one, would give me a different type of fill again. This fill gives me one which is probably looks more like a sphere kind of fill. So I might use this one if I was doing a circle. But you can see that I can play around with these control handles to get my shades and gradients and things different, and it's up to me exactly where I put them and how I use them. like I said, I can always put extra ones in by clicking the plus symbol. Extra handles there will give me the ability to kind of distort these things. I'm actually not going to do that. I'm going to escape this one for now. I'm just going to go for plain colors. Now if I select this one back again, I can choose the color that I want to use for this one. So I'm going to use my color picker, and maybe I'll go for, let's actually go back into the cube view. I might use this one for the top. I'm going to choose my color fill again. I'm going to fill them all in, but then I'm going to change the colors of them. So I'm going to go into there. I'm going to choose the left side, maybe color picker, that side a bit darker. I'm going to come over to here, and I'm going to choose my color picker and choose the darkest color. So you can see, I'm going to press enter to get out of it. Very quickly I can make use of these techniques. Now I've still got my sketch underneath because I can see a bit of it, but I can hide that if I wanted to, so those edges are gone as well. All those things are still there for me to edit with, but I'm ending up with what I want as a better quality picture. In essence, this is what we're going to do with our design work. We're going to do some sketching to actually bring in our initial idea, and then we're going to use the vector layer and the vector tools to tidy it all up and make it look more interesting. Some things worth seeing while we're doing this. If I just, I'm going to come out of this tool, I'm going to go for my selection tool. You can see when I hover over things, the various lines get highlighted. So if I wanted to actually edit them afterwards, I can move these points around and do things with them. That's when I'm using this tool. I'm going to just show you something very quickly. These are some freehand lines. I'm going to draw a couple of freehand lines, and what will happen is if I overlap things, I've got the ability then to fill things in. So you can see if I hover here, I'm getting these red dots. That's telling me it's not a joined up shape. I can't put colour in there. But this one is. I can put colour into that one. If I decided I didn't want these little ends on there, I can come up to this selection, and this selection you can see highlights the ends of things. So if I go over those two, it's telling me, do I want to get rid of those? Press delete on my mouse, on my keyboard, and those ends are gone. So I can trim things off really quickly to make my drawings neater and tidier. So I don't have to worry too much about having lines that overlap and things, because I can use them for sketching and then get rid of them afterwards. There's lots of other features along here. I'm not going to show you all of them now. There's ways of changing the curves. There's a way of joining lines to make curves. You can copy curves, various things like that. There's all different sorts of drawing tools up here. So if you want to use a paintbrush or a marker or an airbrush or whatever instead, you can choose those ones. You can put your text in. These ones over here are to do with distorting and changing shapes. So if I choose this one, I get a handle that comes up, will allow me to rotate what I'm doing, or I can expand it in various directions or scale the whole thing together. So there's lots of options for that. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to undo and go back to where I was so I don't mess anything up. Don't undo the last one. Back to my selection tool. Okay, so that's the main idea. We're going to have a look at doing that with a torch now. Okay, in the same way that I sketched using the isometric grid, I could obviously do that if I wanted to again. So if I didn't want this particular sketch, I could open up a new sketch by coming up to here, going for a new sketch, opening up my isometric grid again, and I could sketch something out. So another alternative is to actually bring in a picture I've already drawn. So I've already got a torch one, so I'm going to import an image, and the image is one that I drew earlier. Now I'm going to zoom so I can see this all on the page. So you can see at the moment this image is bigger than my page. So I'm just going to grab the corners and I'm going to drag it to be the same size as my canvas. I know that the picture I drew was A3 as well, but when I scanned it, it scanned it to a higher res. So there's my picture. I'm going to straighten that up so we can see it. I don't need to do anything else with it, so I can come off that tool now, choose a different tool, or I can switch into a different area up here. What I do want though is I want to be able to draw over the top of this one. So it's this one here. So I actually want to name that so I know what it is. So I'm going to call that one torch image, and same as I did before, I'm going to actually change the opacity of this layer down a little bit so that it's not as dark. Now you can see it's beginning to shine through and show me the isometric grid underneath. That's not a problem. I'm going to turn that one off in a minute, but I've made the lines much less visible now, and I'm going to lock this so it can't be done any harm to, and I'm going to take the isometric grid off. So there's my torch. What I do want to do now, I'm going to move this one higher up by dragging on these arrows, and I'm going to put one layer above it. So now this time I want a vector layer, a new vector layer, and I'm going to rename this one, and I'm going to call this my torch. Okay, and I might put a V there for vector just to remind me what kind of layer I'm working on. So in this layer now I can start to use all these tools to draw my lines over the top, and then what I will do is I will start to put my shading in and add color and so on. So first of all, I'm not going to do all of this on the film, but I'm going to show you bits and pieces of it. So what I would do with a shape like this is I would go for my straight lines first, because straight lines are quite easy to deal with. So I'm just going to pick this tool here, and I'm going to draw from the points that I know are straight. Now we see what I've done. I've left my paint color of my pen to be a purpley sort of shade rather than black. So I want to change that back first of all. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to go for black down there. And I might just select that one that I've already done, delete it and do it again so it's the right color. Okay, so hopefully we're in a black pencil now. Okay, so I'm going to go from line to line and ticking them as I go along to make sure it's what I want. Now the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw different parts of this on different layers. So I'm not actually going to make the body go on one bit, but I'm going to make things like the switch go on another bit. So I'm not going to draw this bit on this layer. I'm going to do that on another layer, and I might even put the bulb on another layer as well. So just to make things easier later on when I want to do shading. Now some of these lines are curved, and we'll get to curves in a minute, but we'll carry on for the moment with pretty much what's straight. So I've got a bit of a curvature on there. I'm going to do this as a straight one for the moment. So I can't remember if my original drawing's wrong or whether it should be curved. Okay, I've got some ellipse shapes here, and I've got an ellipse tool up here. So I'm going to click on my ellipse tool. I'm going to go roughly in the middle, and I'm going to drag up to and get it to approximately the size I want. Now you see it locked to that one up there, but it's actually needs to be a bit bigger than that. So I'm going to go slightly bigger. I'm going to move it down, and now what I can do is I can edit the points on this one. So if I go back to my editing tool, I can add points in. So you can see these pluses. I'm going to put a plus there in the middle, and I'm going to drag that one. I'm going to put another point over here. I'm going to drag that one, and I'm going to put a point to the bottom. I'm going to drag that one. So you can see I can pretty much, I might even want to add another one here just to make that the same. So I can quite easily manipulate these things. Now you'll see these items pop up from time to time. If I click on them, it cycles through and gives me other options for that shape. If I grab the outside bit, it changes and distorts all those things as well. I'm not going to do those for the time being. I'm going to basically click off it now and then press enter and fix up by clicking off that particular curve one. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing again. Choose my ellipse tool, draw my inner one, and again you get it roughly to where you think it's going to be, and then once you've kind of positioned it a little bit, you can choose the selection tool, select and put some extra points in, and then distort things the way you want them to get the right shape. When you're happy with all that, click off it and there's your shape left over. What I need to do now is I need to add some curves shapes in as well. So again, I've got some various options here. I can either do it as a freehand curve, so if I feel happy I can try and do it through myself like this, and I can always use this tool to kind of tidy things up afterwards. If I'm not happy doing it that way, or even though I can come and I can edit these points afterwards and I can lock them in where they need to go, and in the same way I can add my points in to try and adjust the shapes and so on. So actually my lines are probably not long enough on this side, so I've slightly changed my design on there. The other way to do it is to use the the second tool here, which is the one with the points. So the same idea, I can click from a particular point to a particular point and go along, and then when I get to the final one I can click and have it that way. Now I'm actually not going to use that one because I want to put these lines on later on after I've added my colour, so I've only got one section to fill instead of 4 different sections to fill. So I'm going to come back to my selection tool, grab that one up and just delete it out of the way again. So I'm going to go off screen a minute. I'm going to finish up some of these other shapes. What I'm going to do just before I do that though is I'm going to create for myself 2 more layers. I'm going to go for 2 more vector layers, and I'm going to name one of them, and I'm going to call this one bulb, and I'm going to put the bulb on that layer, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to call this one, oops, I created another one I didn't want then, so I can get rid of this one. I'm going to call this one my switch. And before I do anything else with those, I'm going to lock them both so I can't accidentally draw on until I'm ready. So I'm still working on the body of my torch. I'm going to finish those shapes off now and then come back to you. Okay, so as you can see now, I've done the outline of this this torch body. If I actually turn off my background image so I can't see, I can see exactly what I've drawn, which are those lines there without the grooves on. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to do the bulb. So I'm going to lock off my torch body layer, and I'm going to open up or unlock my bulb layer and click onto it. I'm going to zoom in on it, just using the mouse scroll and pan, get it nice and clear. Now what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to combine 2 different types of drawings. So I'm going to use a straight line first of all to go from here to here and tick it, and then I'm going to do the same thing with a curved line. I'm going to start, and you can see when it goes red it means it's locking to the end of that point, and I'm going to draw my shape around like this, knowing that I can edit any of these points later if I want to. So the more points I put in, the more things there are to edit. Sometimes that can be a bit messy though, but this is perfect for doing the bulb. And I'm going to find the red dot and then I'm going to finish it off. So that's my bulb. If I zoom back to normal size to fit to view, and I'm going to do the same thing now. I'm going to lock my bulb, open up my switch, go into my switch, and I'm going to draw my switch in. And again, zooming in is an easier way of doing it. Okay, so I've basically finished putting those shapes in now. I can see if I turn off my sketch that's underneath, that's what my torch looks like. And I know that my torch body's on a different layer to my bulb and my switch. I can find that out quite easily by switching them on and off to tell. And I've locked my bulb and my switch. So at the moment I'm going to be working on my torch body shape, and I basically want to put some colour in. So I'm going to choose to use this fill colour here, and at the moment I can put one in and see what it looks like. So I don't want it to be grey, and I want the bar to be going in a different direction. So I'm going to basically play around with this a little bit first of all. So I'm going to have my bar of white striking roughly up here, but I might want to have some extra shades going on so I can have differentiated colours. So I'm going to add some different colours into these in a moment, and basically I'm going to do the same for this section and this section, and I'm going to do something slightly different but still a colour fill on the end one there. So I'm going to have a little play around with these. Okay, that'll do for this demo. I'm going to do the same thing now into these other sections. We'll press enter to come out of this one, and you'll see that it's taken the colours. It's just the angle that's wrong on this one now, so I should be able to turn that around. Now bearing in mind that this is a slightly wider diameter, So my light's going to strike it slightly higher up. So something a bit more like that. Same thing, press enter. I'm going to click into my next one. Same thing, it's put it in initially in the wrong direction, so I'm going to switch the direction round. I'm going to move some of these things around a little bit. Now that's looking not too bad for a quick first go. Now this end section, I'm going to fill that one as well, and you can see now what I want the white one to do is I want it to go on a slight angle kind of this way, but I want it to be a little bit more in the middle than this. So I'm going to move some of these things across. I'm going to do something like that, and I think the only thing I might change is I might make this one here slightly lighter so it's the same as the other ones. Maybe it's that one. Okay, that's not too bad. It's maybe a little bit. Probably want all of them to be the same on this one. There we go. And again, press enter and click off. So that's my initial shading. At any point, I can come back into this tool, and if I click into these sections, you can see them going orange. They're the fill colors, so I can come back and I can re-edit them afterwards. So it's not a problem playing around with them. Okay, so I'm just going to go through and show you now the finished torch. I've turned off all the layers at the moment, and I'm going to just turn them on one by one and let you see what's happened. So I said that we could have started off with an isometric and used that for sketching, and we have got a sketch layer we could do things like that on. But what I did do is I brought in a picture of a torch, one that I'd drawn by hand and inked in, and so this is basically a scan of an earlier one that I did. What I did then was I created a body of a torch over the top of it, and that torch body then I basically used this fill technique up here, and I made sure that I was using a couple of shades of purple and one white to give that kind of reflective view. This part of the reflective area of where the torch the light shines from, I did in the same way. I used this technique up here, this tool, to do a particular kind of fill, but then I moved the handles on it. If I click on it and show you, I need to unlock it first. Oops, I'm on the wrong one. Let me have a look. Unlock this one. If I select it, you can see the shape that I created by putting these extra handles in to try and give the fill a particular angle. I'm going to lock that back up again. Then what I did was I had separate layers for the bulb, and same thing, I used a gradient fill in that one, and I altered where the handles were to make it look kind of more interesting. I can zoom in on that and show you what that looks like. So basically I've got the white bit in the middle, and then I've got a yellow, and then I've got a darker grey. And again, if I unlock that and show you what it looks like using the selection tool. Oh, I need to unlock be on the right layer. That's what my gradient fill tool looks like. So this is the white and the yellow there. That's a yellow, and then there's a dark grey over here, and these are where I put the handles. So you can play around with these things quite a lot to actually get them the way you want them. Let's just zoom back to normal size. So I'm going to turn off my my torch view. Oops, I'm going to turn off my torch image view, and I'll show you the last few bits. So the last thing that I did was then I made the switch. So the switch came on like that, and I put the grooves on as a separate layer to give it some more interesting looks. And again, I've used some gradient fills in these grooves, and I've just used kind of white lines to show where the light would reflect. And then finally I added some basically yellow airbrush underneath. So I basically went in and used the airbrush mode as a paint layer. So this is a paint layer, not a vector layer, and you notice that this is underneath, and so it comes out in a different position. So my paint layer is here. If I'd moved my paint layer higher up, it would be on top of my work, which is obviously no good to me. So I'm going to put it back underneath the bottom there. The last thing I did was I used the airbrush, sorry, I used the marker to do the yellow, then I used an airbrush to put some shadow effect on. So that's the final design. You can see how I've used the layers. The only thing I didn't do along the way was save. So when you do save, I made sure that I gave mine a different name. So you can see up here mine says Torch 3, but it's the same file format. It's a DWG, which is an AutoCAD file, which means it keeps all its layers, so I can come back at any point and open it and I can edit anything on these layers. Okay, works in a similar way to Photoshop, but you've got a lot more control over what you're doing. Okay, good luck having a go with this.